They don't seek out your strength. No, strength makes them uncomfortable. It's your weakness they crave, the cracks in your armor where doubt leaks through. That's their playground, their hunting ground. They thrive in the shadows of your insecurity, planting seeds of fear and watering them with subtle jabs and calculated silence. It's a slow erosion, not an earthquake. And you've been complicit, haven't you? Not because you're weak, but because you were led to believe their whispers carried wisdom, that their scrutiny was care. It's not. It's control. The game is one-sided, designed to keep you tethered, a pawn in their orchestrated chaos. They exploit your insecurities like strings on a marionette, making you dance to their tune. Each hesitation, each self-doubt is another thread they pull tighter. You question your worth because they've made it their mission to ensure you do. They thrive off your uncertainty, your need for approval, like parasites feeding on the host. And the worst part? You hand them the knife, thinking it's safer that way, thinking it will hurt less, but it doesn't. They craft a narrative where your flaws are the centerpiece, a story where you are both villain and victim. They recite it often enough that you begin to believe it's true. Each passing comment, each sideways glance is another chapter. They love your hesitation because it means control. They celebrate your silence because it means submission. And all the while, you think their affection is conditional upon your compliance. But it's not affection, it's a leash, and you're letting them hold it. You think you're playing along for peace, for harmony, but there's no peace in this game. Their validation is a mirage, always just out of reach, making you chase it endlessly. They pit you against yourself, and you play along because you've been taught that conflict is dangerous, that standing tall invites isolation. But that's the trick, isn't it? Isolation is their threat, but it's also their greatest fear. They can't survive without an audience, without someone to control. And the day you stop performing, the stage collapses. Freedom is terrifying. To them, not to you. They've built their identity on the shaky foundation of your submission. Your doubts fuel their confidence. Your fears mask their own. They need you to remain trapped in their cycle because breaking free would force them to face themselves. And there's nothing more horrifying to them than the void they've been avoiding. But you have everything to gain by shattering that illusion, by stepping away and watching their world crumble. It's not your weakness they exploit. It's your humanity, your ability to care, to empathize. They twist those virtues into chains, wrapping you in guilt and obligation. They want you to believe that walking away makes you heartless, that choosing yourself is selfish. But selfishness in their eyes is nothing more than self-preservation. It's not cruelty to refuse to be their doormat. It's survival. And survival, as messy and chaotic as it feels, is the greatest rebellion against their control. They fear your potential more than anything else. A confident, self-assured version of you is their nightmare. They see it in glimpses, in moments when you laugh too freely or speak with too much certainty. They scramble to put out those sparks before they catch fire because they know that once you realize your power, you'll burn their carefully constructed facade to the ground. And when that fire ignites, it's not destructive. It's cleansing. It's the light they can't extinguish. Insecurities are not chains. They're markers, signposts pointing to where the work needs to be done. And doing the work? That terrifies them, because growth means outgrowing them, shedding their influence like dead skin. They'll try to convince you otherwise, of course, using every trick in their arsenal to keep you small. But tricks only work when the audience believes the illusion. And once you see through it, their magic fades, their grip weakens. Their world depends on you staying the same, but the universe thrives on change. You are not static, not defined by their narrow perspective. You are fluid, evolving, a masterpiece in progress. Every time they try to box you in, they're only reminding you of how boundless you truly are. And the moment you stop shrinking to fit their narrative, you'll find that the story you tell yourself is far more compelling, far more powerful. People can only manipulate what you refuse to confront within yourself. It's a simple truth, cloaked in the complexity of your own avoidance. The things you suppress, the fears you bury, the doubts you drown in silence. Those are the very weapons handed to others to use against you. You hide your insecurities, thinking concealment is protection, but it's the opposite. A predator doesn't attack strength. It hunts vulnerability. And when you refuse to face the mirror, you leave your reflection exposed for others to define. They see the cracks you deny, and they exploit them with precision, turning your fear of inadequacy into strings they pull at will. The irony is that the flaws you fear revealing are often the ones you can reclaim. Confronting what scares you disarms the manipulators. When you face your insecurities head-on, you rob them of their power. Fear doesn't thrive in light. It shrinks under scrutiny. But so long as you avoid it, pretend it isn't there, or worse, allow others to amplify it, you remain a prisoner. The cage isn't locked. The chains aren't real. Yet your refusal to look closely at what holds you keeps you bound. And this refusal is their greatest ally, their most potent tool. Think about it. How often do you let others dictate your value because you're too afraid to define it for yourself? They know exactly where to aim because you've handed them the map. Your insecurities act as a beacon, guiding them to the places where you feel weakest. You hesitate to speak because you fear being judged. You avoid risks because you dread failure. And in doing so, you give them control over your choices. Confronting these fears doesn't make you invincible, but it makes you untouchable. It changes the game from one of reaction to one of action. The process is far from easy. It's a brutal journey to face your insecurities, to peel back the layers of denial, and stand before the raw truth of who you are. But there's power in that vulnerability, a power most people are too afraid to wield. The manipulators, the ones who thrive on your doubt, they lack the courage to confront their own flaws. That's why they fixate on yours. They need your insecurities as a distraction from their own. Their entire game depends on you playing the role they've assigned you. The moment you step out of character, the stage collapses. Reclaiming your insecurities is not about erasing them. It's about owning them. Acknowledge your fears, your doubts, your perceived weaknesses. Say them out loud, if you have to, but make sure you say them to yourself, not to those who would weaponize them. When you own your story, the narrative changes. You stop being a supporting character in someone else's drama and become the protagonist of your own journey. And let's face it, no one knows how to tell your story better than you. The manipulators rely on your silence, on your reluctance to confront the truth within yourself. They bank on you staying passive, on letting the weight of your insecurities crush you under its burden. But what happens when you pick up that weight and carry it instead? When you turn what once held you down into the very thing that propels you forward? That's not just growth, it's transformation. And transformation terrifies those who've built their lives around keeping you small. Insecurities are not your enemy. They're not flaws to be erased or scars to be hidden. They're parts of you, raw and unpolished, waiting to be understood. Manipulators twist them into weapons because they see the potential you refuse to acknowledge. The moment you stop seeing your insecurities as weaknesses and start viewing them as opportunities for growth, the game changes. You're no longer a victim. You're a force to be reckoned with. Manipulation thrives in ignorance. The less you know about yourself, the easier you are to control. Self-awareness isn't just a defense, it's a weapon. It's the light that blinds those who operate in shadows. When you confront your insecurities, when you understand them and integrate them into your identity, you become unshakable. No insult, no attack, no whispered doubt can pierce the armor you've forged. And that kind of strength is something no manipulator can ever touch. Your insecurities, when left unchecked, are invitations. Invitations for others to define you, control you, shape you. But when you confront them, when you own them, they become your strength. They become the foundation upon which you build resilience, confidence, and power. And those who once sought to manipulate you, they find themselves standing on shifting ground, their weapons rendered useless against someone who no longer fears their own reflection. Remember this: the only way to take back your power is to face what you've been running from. The moment you stop hiding, you stop being a target. Your insecurities are not tools for others to use. They're keys, waiting for you to unlock the version of yourself that doesn't just survive, but thrives. And when you do, when you rise from the ashes of your doubt, you'll realize that the only person who ever had the right to define you was the one staring back in the mirror. They point at your insecurities, not to help you, but to keep you blind to their true nature. Those doubts you carry, they're not defects. They're untapped power waiting to be harnessed. They know this, of course. They see the potential in your self-perceived flaws before you do. And that terrifies them. The moment you realize that your insecurities are merely strengths in disguise, their grip on you weakens. They rely on your blindness, your hesitation to dig deeper into yourself. Because the truth is, what you view as a shortcoming is often a reflection of your unique brilliance, raw and unpolished. Think about it. Insecurity stems from the fear of imperfection, but imperfection is where creativity, resilience, and innovation are born. They exploit this fear, magnify it, and turn it into a cage. When you feel small, when you feel inadequate, it's easier for them to mold you, manipulate you, and keep you under control. The irony is that the very traits you hide, the ones you think make you vulnerable, are the seeds of your greatness. They fear the day you embrace them, because that's the day their influence over you ends. Your so-called flaws are unpolished gems, and like any raw material, they require effort and courage to refine. But the payoff is immense. Every scar, every misstep, every doubt is a lesson, a stepping stone towards self-mastery. The problem isn't the insecurity itself. It's the story you tell yourself about it. And who benefits from that story? Certainly not you. The moment you rewrite the narrative, when you begin to see your insecurities as areas of growth rather than weaknesses, you shift the balance of power. You become the sculptor of your own identity, not the pawn in someone else's game. People fear what they don't understand, and that includes you, understanding yourself. Self-awareness is a mirror they don't want you to look into because it forces them to confront their own insecurities. They project their fears onto you, disguising it as criticism or concern. But the truth is, they're terrified of your awakening. They know that once you start polishing those hidden strengths, you'll outshine them. And when that happens, their petty games, their manipulation, their control, it all falls apart. The greatest lie they've ever told you is that your insecurities define you. But here's the punchline. Insecurities are fluid. They're not set in stone, and they're certainly not immutable. The only thing fixed is their fear of you discovering this. When you start chipping away at that facade, you reveal the brilliance beneath. And oh, how that terrifies them. Because a confident, self-aware version of you isn't just unshakable, it's unstoppable. The process of uncovering your strengths is messy, painful even. It requires confronting truths about yourself that you've avoided, delving into the parts of you that feel raw and unfinished. But the discomfort is temporary. What lies on the other side is liberation. It's a freedom they'll never understand because they've spent their lives hiding from their own flaws. They weaponize your insecurities because they can't face their own. But you have the courage to face yourself. Every insecurity you own becomes a weapon they can no longer use. Every doubt you confront becomes a shield. And every fear you conquer becomes a stepping stone toward your freedom. They don't want you to realize this because it shifts the narrative. You go from being a victim of their manipulation to the architect of your destiny. And nothing frightens a manipulator more than losing control over the story they've written for you. They call your insecurities weaknesses because they're afraid of your potential. They know that once you embrace those so-called flaws, you'll become something they can't handle. Strength doesn't come from perfection. It comes from resilience, from rising despite the cracks. And when you own your imperfections, you transform them into strengths that they can't exploit. It's not just empowerment, it's revolution. The only thing standing between you and the person you're meant to become is your willingness to face what you've been running from. They fear that willingness because it makes you unpredictable, uncontrollable. Once you step into the light of your own self-awareness, their shadows have nowhere to hide. The game they play becomes meaningless when you stop playing along. And that, my friend, is the ultimate checkmate. Doubt is the most insidious chain. You don't feel its weight at first. It starts as a whisper, a small hesitation. But over time, it grows. It wraps around your mind, your decisions, your dreams, until you're no longer moving forward. You're just standing still, tethered to the ground by the questions you've let fester. And the ones who plant those doubts, they're not interested in your growth. No, they thrive on your stagnation, because as long as you're doubting, you're not rising. Confidence is the one thing they can't tolerate. It's their kryptonite, their undoing. When you're confident, you're free. Free to think, free to act, free to live without their influence. That's why they work so hard to undermine it. They chip away at your self-assurance with backhanded compliments, subtle criticisms, and calculated silence. Every seed of doubt they plant is another link in the chain they use to keep you under control. And the worst part? You don't even realize it's happening until the chain is fully formed. They know that the key to controlling you isn't brute force. It's the slow erosion of your belief in yourself. A confident person is unmanageable. A confident person, he doesn't ask for permission, doesn't wait for approval. Confidence is the ultimate rebellion, the ultimate act of defiance against those who seek to manipulate. And that's why they fear it so much. It's not just a threat to their control. It's a reminder of their own lack of courage, their own insecurities. But here's the thing about chains. They're only as strong as your willingness to wear them. Doubt only holds power if you let it. Confidence isn't about being flawless or fearless. It's about trusting yourself enough to take action despite your flaws and fears. It's about breaking the chain link by link, reclaiming your autonomy, one decision at a time. And once you start, the chain begins to crumble. What once felt unbreakable becomes fragile, meaningless. They will fight to keep you doubting because your freedom is a direct challenge to their control. But their fight is futile the moment you realize that confidence isn't something they can give or take away. It's something you cultivate within yourself. It's not about proving them wrong. It's about proving yourself right. It's about stepping into your power, owning your decisions, and refusing to let their opinions dictate your path. The beauty of confidence is that it doesn't just free you. It exposes them. It forces them to confront their own lack of self-belief, their own reliance on controlling others to feel secure. And that confrontation, it's something they've been avoiding their entire lives. Your freedom becomes their mirror, reflecting back all the things they've tried to bury. And in that reflection, their chains lose their grip. Doubt is a cage, but it's a cage with an open door. Confidence is the key, and you've had it all along. The only thing stopping you from stepping out is the belief that you can't. But once you take that first step, you realize that the walls of the cage were never as solid as they seemed. They were made of illusions, of lies you were told, and lies you told yourself. And when those illusions shatter, so does their control. Every time you choose confidence over doubt, you weaken their grip. Every time you trust yourself, you strip away their power. Confidence is contagious, infectious, and once you embrace it, it spreads to every corner of your life. It changes the way you see yourself, the way you see others, and the way others see you. It's not just a personal transformation, it's a revolution. Remember this, no one can chain you without your consent. Doubt may feel heavy, but it's a weight you can set down at any time. Confidence isn't about being perfect, it's about being free. Free to make mistakes, free to learn, free to grow. And once you taste that freedom, there's no going back. The chains fall away, the doubts lose their voice, and the ones who once held you down are left powerless. Let them plant their doubts. Let them whisper their criticisms. Because while they're busy forging chains, you're busy breaking free. And when you do, when you step into your confidence, they won't just lose control. They'll lose the very game they thought they were winning. Flaws are only weapons when you allow them to be. They're sharp, yes, but their edge is dull the second you pick them up and hold them in your hands. The manipulators in your life, they rely on your refusal to touch them. They bank on your discomfort, on your fear of looking too closely at the parts of yourself you'd rather forget. It's not the flaw itself that gives them power. It's your denial, your shame, your reluctance to accept what is inherently human. The moment you own your flaws, their arsenal crumbles into dust. To know yourself is to become unpredictable. Manipulators thrive on patterns, on predictability, on the assurance that you will react the same way every time. Self-awareness breaks that cycle. It allows you to see your own triggers, your own blind spots, and to take control of them. Suddenly, their calculated moves fall flat. They lose the ability to provoke you, to control you, because you've already done the work they hoped you'd avoid. Self-knowledge is not just a shield. It's a sword. It cuts through their illusions, their mind games, their manipulative tactics. When you understand yourself, you see through their attempts to define you. Their criticisms become noise. Their judgments lose weight. You recognize their tactics not as truths, but as reflections of their own insecurities. They're not pointing out your flaws. They're projecting their fears. And when you see it for what it is, it loses its power. They fear the enlightened version of you because it's a version they can't control. Self-awareness makes you unshakable, unmovable. It anchors you in truth, not their version of truth, but yours. They can no longer twist your perception because your perception is rooted in clarity. You know who you are, and no amount of manipulation can alter that. Their games rely on confusion, on doubt, on ignorance. Self-awareness dismantles all of it. But knowing yourself isn't a passive act. It's an active, ongoing process. It's uncomfortable, messy, and sometimes painful. It requires confronting parts of yourself you'd rather ignore, peeling back layers of conditioning, and questioning everything you thought you knew. It's not for the faint of heart. And that's why so many people avoid it. It's easier to look outward, to blame, to deflect. But easier doesn't mean better. And it certainly doesn't mean free. Self-awareness isn't just about knowing your strengths. It's about owning your weaknesses. It's about understanding your insecurities, not hiding from them. When you do this, you reclaim the parts of yourself they've used against you. You become whole, integrated, powerful. They can no longer exploit what you've already embraced. Their weapons become relics, outdated tools in a battle they've already lost. Enlightenment isn't about perfection. It's about perception. It's about seeing yourself clearly, flaws and all, and finding strength in that clarity. The enlightened person isn't free from insecurities. They're free from the fear of them. And that freedom is terrifying to those who operate in the shadows. They lose their leverage, their influence, their ability to control. And in that loss, they reveal themselves for what they truly are: scared, small, and powerless. To know yourself is to liberate yourself. It's the ultimate act of rebellion, the ultimate rejection of their control. They can't chain you if you understand your own mind, your own heart, your own worth. They can't define you if you've already defined yourself. And once you reach that point, you realize they never had power over you to begin with. The only power they had was the power you unknowingly gave them. Validation is their favorite bait. a dangling promise of approval that keeps you tethered to their whims. They thrive on your need for it, using it to control, manipulate, and keep you small. The ones who prey on your insecurities are experts at offering just enough praise to make you crave more, but never enough to satisfy. It's a cycle, a carefully constructed game designed to ensure you keep coming back for their approval. But here's the truth. You don't need it. Their validation isn't a reward. It's a trap. Think about it. When you seek validation from someone who exploits your doubts, you're giving them the keys to your worth. They decide when you're good enough, when you've done enough, when you deserve to feel confident. It's a power dynamic built on imbalance, and they hold the scales. But what happens when you stop seeking their approval? What happens when you realize that your value isn't something they can measure? The entire dynamic collapses, leaving them scrambling for control. They rely on your need for external affirmation because it distracts you from building internal confidence. Validation from them is like drinking salt water. It might quench your thirst for a moment, but it leaves you emptier, more desperate, and more dependent. Real confidence doesn't come from their fleeting compliments. It comes from within, from knowing who you are without needing their stamp of approval. The moment you find that confidence, you rob them of their most effective weapon. The irony is, they don't truly believe in the validation they offer. It's not genuine. It's a tool, a means to an end. They dole it out, not because they see your worth, but because they see your need. And that need is what they exploit. But when you stop needing it, when you stop looking to them for affirmation, their tool becomes useless. They lose the ability to control you because you've taken control of your own narrative. True validation comes from self-awareness, from knowing your strengths and owning your flaws. It's about looking in the mirror and recognizing your value without needing someone else to confirm it. It's about standing firm in who you are, regardless of what they think, say, or do. And when you reach that point, you become untouchable. Their opinions lose their weight, their judgments lose their sting, and their games lose their appeal. People who thrive on your doubts are terrified of your independence. They know that once you stop seeking their validation, you'll see them for what they truly are: small, insecure, and reliant on others to feel powerful. They project their fears onto you, hoping you'll carry the burden they can't bear. But when you let go of the need for their approval, you hand that burden back to them, and they're not equipped to handle it. Validation is an illusion when it comes from those who exploit you. It's a false promise, a mirage that keeps you chasing, but never arriving. But self-validation, that's real, that's sustainable. It doesn't waver with their moods or crumble under their criticisms. It's solid, unshakable, and entirely within your control. The moment you stop seeking their approval is the moment you start living on your own terms. They'll try to convince you that their validation is essential, that without it, you're lost. But that's their fear speaking, not your truth. They need you to believe in their importance because it masks their own lack of self-worth. When you see through this facade, you realize that their approval was never about you. It was about them. And that realization is your freedom. You don't need validation from those who thrive on your doubts, because your worth isn't tied to their perception. It exists independently, unshaken by their opinions. The moment you recognize this, You reclaim your power. And once you have that power, their games become irrelevant. You're no longer a pawn in their story. You're the author of your own. The unconscious is a quiet puppeteer, pulling strings you don't even know exist. It's the shadow realm of your mind, where buried insecurities and unexamined fears hide in the dark. Those who manipulate you understand this all too well. They thrive on what you refuse to see in yourself, turning your hidden doubts into chains you willingly wear. And when you stumble, trapped by patterns you don't understand, they laugh and call it destiny. But it's not fate. It's the unconscious, unchallenged and unchecked, steering your life in directions you never chose. Manipulators love the unconscious because it's predictable. They don't need to work hard to control you when your unresolved fears and doubts do the job for them. You react, you hesitate, you shrink back, not because of what they've done, but because of what you've left unaddressed within yourself. Every time you avoid facing the parts of yourself you don't like, you give them more power. The unconscious is not fate, but it feels like it when you let it run the show. To make the unconscious conscious is to take back control. It's a brutal process, like turning on a light in a room you've been avoiding for years. You see the mess, the cobwebs, the shadows you've ignored. But it's also liberating, because once you see what's been hiding in the dark, you can start cleaning up. You can start making choices based on clarity, not confusion. And in doing so, you strip manipulators of their strongest tool, your ignorance of yourself. They'll resist your awakening because it makes you unpredictable. They can no longer anticipate your moves when you're guided by self-awareness instead of unconscious habits. They'll call you stubborn, difficult, or even selfish for stepping out of their control. But that's their fear talking. They know that a conscious mind is a free mind, and freedom is the one thing they can't manipulate. The unconscious was their playground. Consciousness is their nightmare. Patterns repeat until you break them. The same mistakes, the same doubts, the same fears. They'll loop endlessly until you bring them into the light. And the manipulators? They'll exploit those loops for as long as you allow it. They'll make you believe it's fate, that you're destined to feel this way, to live this way. But fate has nothing to do with it. The cycle only continues because you've yet to confront what lies beneath. The moment you do, the cycle ends. Making the unconscious conscious isn't about perfection. It's about awareness. It's about recognizing your triggers, your blind spots, your patterns of self-sabotage. It's about seeing yourself clearly, even when the view isn't pretty. And when you do, you take away the mystery, the confusion, the uncertainty that manipulators use against you. They can no longer play on your fears when you've already faced them head on. They can no longer exploit your doubts when you've dismantled them yourself. Awakening to your unconscious mind is an act of rebellion. It's a rejection of the stories you've been told, the roles you've been assigned, and the doubts you've internalized. It's a declaration that you will no longer be a victim of your own mind. And that declaration sends a shockwave through the world of those who seek to control you. They thrive in the dark, and you've just turned on the light. Consciousness isn't just awareness, it's power. It's the ability to choose, to act, to live deliberately. It's the end of autopilot, the death of fate as an excuse. When you make the unconscious conscious, you stop being a passenger in your own life. You take the wheel and you steer with intention. And manipulators, they hate intention. It's a force they can't compete with, a strength they can't undermine. The unconscious will direct your life until you take the reins. It's not fate, it's a lack of awareness. And awareness is something you can cultivate, something you can build. It's not easy, but it's worth it, because the life you create with a conscious mind is one that no one can take from you. It's a life of freedom, of purpose, of authenticity. So stop calling it fate. Stop believing the lie that this is all there is. Turn inward, confront the unconscious, and watch as the manipulations crumble, the chains fall away, and the life you were meant to live begins to unfold. Power isn't something that can be taken from you. It's something you give away, often unknowingly. Doubt is the perfect thief. It whispers lies so convincing that you don't even notice when you hand over the keys to your own strength. When you doubt your power, you create a vacuum, a space where your confidence should reside. And manipulators? They're experts at filling that void. They don't need to overpower you because your doubts do the work for them. They step in, amplify those whispers, and wield your uncertainty as a weapon against you. Doubt is insidious because it feels like protection. It tells you to hold back, to second guess, to avoid risks. But what it's really doing is building walls between you and your potential. The more you doubt yourself, the more those walls close in, turning your world into a cage. And while you sit behind those bars, questioning your worth, the manipulators roam free, using your hesitations to keep you subdued. They know that as long as you doubt your power, you'll never challenge theirs. Confidence doesn't mean you never feel doubt. It means you don't let doubt dictate your actions. It's about stepping forward, even when the whispers in your mind tell you to stay still. Manipulators hate this because it disrupts their control. They rely on your inaction, your hesitation, your constant need to second guess yourself. But when you move with conviction, you render their tactics useless. They lose their leverage because doubt is no longer the dominant voice in your life. To reclaim your power, you must first recognize where you've given it away. Look at the moments when doubt held you back, when you didn't speak up, didn't take the leap, didn't trust yourself. Those moments aren't failures. They're lessons. They show you where your work lies, where your focus needs to be. The beauty of power is that it's never truly lost. It's always there, waiting for you to reclaim it, to wield it with purpose. Manipulators thrive on your belief that doubt is truth. They plant seeds of insecurity and water them with subtle digs, veiled criticisms, and comparisons. But here's the thing. Doubt is not truth. It's a shadow, an illusion, a distortion of reality. The moment you challenge it, it begins to crumble. And when it does, you see the truth clearly, that your power was never in question. It was only buried beneath layers of self-doubt that you've allowed to accumulate. Owning your power doesn't mean arrogance. It means authenticity. It means standing in your truth, flaws and all, and refusing to let doubt define you. Manipulators fear this authenticity because it's immune to their influence. They can't control someone who knows their worth, who acts with purpose, who doesn't need external validation to feel complete. By doubting your power, you give them the control they crave. By reclaiming it, you take it back. Power isn't about perfection. It's about resilience. It's about knowing that you'll face challenges, setbacks, and doubts, but choosing to rise anyway. Doubt will always exist. It's a part of being human, but it doesn't have to rule you. The more you act despite your doubts, the weaker they become. And the weaker they become, the less control manipulators have over you. Confidence isn't the absence of doubt. It's the refusal to let doubt win. Every time you choose belief over doubt, you reclaim a piece of your power. It's a process, a practice, a daily decision to trust yourself more than the voices that try to undermine you. And as you do, you'll notice something remarkable. The manipulators start to fade into the background. They lose interest. Their words lose weight. Their presence becomes insignificant because they can't manipulate someone who doesn't doubt their own strength. When you doubt your power, you shrink. You make yourself small, quiet, and easy to control. But when you embrace your power, you expand. You become bold, loud, and impossible to ignore. The choice is always yours. You can give power to your doubt, or you can reclaim it for yourself. The former keeps you caged. The latter sets you free. And freedom, as messy and unpredictable as it may be, is always worth the fight. They focus your attention on the past and the future, distracting you from the most important battlefield, the present moment within yourself. They remind you of your mistakes, your failures, your insecurities, painting your past as a weight too heavy to overcome. They fill your mind with fears of the future, of what might go wrong, of what you might lose. But the real power, the truth they don't want you to see, lies in what's inside you right now. What lies within you is not only greater than what's behind or ahead, it's untouchable. The past is a chain only if you let it be. Manipulators love to drape it around your neck, tightening it with reminders of your lowest points. They make you believe your history defines you, that you are nothing more than the sum of your mistakes. But here's the reality. Your past is a lesson, not a sentence. It's a chapter, not the whole book. What lies within you is the ability to rewrite, to transform, to rise above the narrative they've tried to trap you in. And the future. It's their favorite tool of fear. They'll whisper about what might happen if you fail, if you misstep, if you dare to try. They paint it as a storm, but it's nothing more than a blank canvas, waiting for your brush. The future doesn't hold power over you unless you give it power. What lies within you, your resilience, your creativity, your strength, is what shapes the future, not their dire predictions. To understand what lies within you, you must quiet the noise of the past and the future. This is where they try to keep you distracted, caught in regret or anxiety, unable to see the present clearly. But within you is the power to center yourself, to ground yourself in who you are right now. It's not an easy task. It requires self-awareness, courage, and a willingness to confront the parts of yourself you've avoided. But once you do, the distractions fall away, and their hold over you weakens. What lies within you is not fragile. It's formidable. It's the source of your strength, your passion, your drive. It's where your insecurities transform into assets, where your doubts dissolve into clarity. And they fear this because they have no access to it. They can manipulate your perception of the past and instill fear of the future, but they can't touch what's inside you. That's your domain, your sanctuary, your source of freedom. They rely on your blindness to this inner power. As long as you're looking backward or forward, you're not looking inward. And as long as you're not looking inward, they can control the narrative. But the moment you turn your gaze inward, everything changes. You see their tactics for what they are: distractions, smoke, and mirrors, desperate attempts to keep you from realizing your own potential. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. The greatest power lies in understanding yourself. It's not about erasing the past or ignoring the future. It's about integrating them into a larger understanding of who you are. The past provides lessons. The future provides opportunities. But the present, the self within, is where action happens. It's where growth occurs, where decisions are made, where freedom begins. And that's what they fear most: your ability to act independently of their influence. What lies within you is the power to rewrite your story, to take the pen from their hands and craft your own narrative. It's the power to let go of the past, to embrace the present, and to shape the future on your terms.